To our professor, Dr. Percy Gallardo, classmates, fellow teachers, good evening. I will be sharing with you tonight the result of the collaborative efforts of Group 2, composed of the following reporters: Ma'am Alma Bustamante, Ma'am Marilo Bagolor, Ma'am Regina Hawood, Ma'am Rosel May Lorin, and yours truly, Marlon J. Navales. The importance of philosophy in educational management. The philosophy of education plays an important role in providing direction to education. A nation's policy on education is the government's way of attaining that aspect of the national goals which can be achieved through the instrumentality of education. No policy on education, however, can be formulated without the primary identification of the overall philosophy and goals of the nation. It is clear that a mind that is sick will be handicapped to coordinate and direct bodily activities. This provides us the basis to argue that education is the most significant complex of social control mechanism or tools that promotes national development. As the engine room of national development, it is imperative that education must be established or founded on a good philosophy. This is so because philosophy involves thinking deeply about something. So thinking here implies thinking deeply about education. Education can be considered a good education when it is able to implant in those being educated to think deeply about all that they learn and be able to explore the big questions and ensure that all the parts they learn fit perfectly together to offer explanation about the world. Philosophy of education has been defined as the map which provides direction to move ahead. One may feel lost without a map. In the same way, you are going to miss your destination in teaching if a specific path is not decided well. Importance of philosophy of education to educational management. Philosophy of education gives direction and points of destination to the teachers, administrators, and supervisors in formulation their educational aims and objectives to be achieved in selecting and organizing subject matters to be taught, in selecting methods of teaching and techniques to be used and evaluate the result of teaching and learning. Function of educational philosophy. Determining aspects of education. B. Harmonizing old and new tradition in the field of education. Providing educational planners, administrators, and educators with a progressive vision to achieve educational development. And D. preparing the young generation to face the challenges of modern time. Determining aspects of education. We have aims of education, curriculum, methods of teaching, teachers and students' roles, and administration. Philosophy of education influences the aims of education. The aims and ideals of education, too, are determined by philosophy of education a country believes in. Different philosophies of education have different views on education. A country that tends to believe in the philosophy of idealism will stress on creating a spiritual environment in the school as that pupils develop spiritual values and attain self-realization. Naturalism will like to see that the child is made to learn from nature in a natural way and realizes his potentialities. Pragmatism does not accept any universal or eternal and preconceived aim of education. Like that aim of education are necessarily influenced by the philosophy of education. What is the ultimate aim of education? Its primary aim is to produce an educated man, one who meets the various criteria of intellectual, moral, and aesthetic development. An end to that is also the development of literacy and numeracy, or to produce sufficient number of workers like doctors, lawyers, engineers, and many others. It can be construed as a vehicle to bring about skilled workers. But most importantly, to us the aim of education is to conceive or think of education as an end in itself. Education makes a person intrinsically good in knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values. Curriculum. It helps curriculum designer to construct curriculum according to the need, ability, and interest of the learner. The issue of what should be taught to students at all levels of education as curriculum is an extraordinarily difficult one with which to grapple. Issues such as the proper ordering or sequencing of topics and the chosen subjects, the time to be allocated to its topic, the laboratory work or excursion or projects that are appropriate for particular topics, can all be regarded as technical issues best resolved either by educationists who have a depth of experience with the target age group or by experts. The philosophy to determine the aims of education for the best interest of the learners, however, it is the curriculum that determines how these aims can be attained. The curriculum is the means to attain the aims of education. It is also important to be reminded that its curriculum is to be determined by the educational objectives, which again influence largely to the philosophy of education that the school adheres to and the goals of the national government. It is through the philosophy that educators are directed on what to teach and how to teach effectively to meet the learning outcomes as guided by the vision, mission, and goals of the school and that of what is set targets by the government. Philosophy education influences the curriculum. What should be taught in the school is also influenced by the kind of philosophy of education a society supports. Various philosophies of education advocates differing views on curriculum naturalism. For example, lays stress on subjects that helps in self-expression and self-preservation. It advocates teaching of basic sciences, physical and health education. Idealism emphasizes teaching of higher values through ethics, religion, art, and subjects of humanities. And pragmatism focuses on child-centered curriculum consisting of activities and based on child's experience. Methods of teaching. Educational philosophy is very much helpful to adopt suitable methods of teaching. We get knowledge of different methods of teaching. Example, learning by doing in naturalism, lecture method in idealism, and experimental method in pragmatism. It helps us to choose the suitable methods of teaching according to the nature of the subject and school environment. Methods of teaching, too, are influenced by the philosophy of education a society adopts. A system of education based on the naturalism stresses learning by doing, learning through experience, and learning through observation. Society which tends towards idealism prefer to have a system of education which prescribes rigid methods of teaching, such as lecturing, and prefer learning through imitation, memorization, and discussion. Pragmatism stresses problem solving and methods and project methods of teaching. The concept of discipline and its practice also influenced by the philosophy of education. To naturalists, discipline is to be learned by natural consequences. The child enjoy maximum freedom. Self-discipline is preferred to external control. The idealist, on the other hand, wishes to enforce discipline through cultivation of higher values, moral and religious teachings, and strict control over the child. In the scheme of the pragmatist, there is no place for punishment, and discipline is learned through moral training, which is based child experiences gained through various kinds of schools activities and programs. In the same way, several other aspects as the place of the child in education, the importance of the teachers, preparation of textbooks, and others are influenced by the philosophy of education adopted by a system of education. Educational philosophy helps the teacher, the administrators, and the students interpret his or her professional experiences with the acquired theoretical knowledge and vice versa. Teacher and student. Educational philosophy determines the role and quality of teacher as well as the student in diversified society. With the help of educational philosophy, we get knowledge pertaining to the role of the teacher as well as student in the school and relationship with each other. Administration. The knowledge of what kind of administration we should adopt for an educational institute is determined by educational philosophy. The school administrators wear many hats. They are instructional leaders, the coaches, the supervisors, the evaluators. At times they are counselors, disciplinarians, and depending on the size of the school and district, the principal might act as a nurse or a custodian when necessary. For a true leader, there is no job that is beneath them. Great school administrators do what needs to be done so that the work that needs to get done is completed. The job of a school is educate students, and while the principal is ultimately responsible for the daily operation of the school, the biggest role of a principal is to ensure that learning takes place, that students leave at the end of the school year with the skills that they need to be successful of whatever may come next. Harmonizing old and new tradition in the field of education. In the process of social development, the old traditions become outdated for the people. They are replaced by the new traditions. This process of replacement is not yet always smooth. It is faced with lots of opposition from certain orthodox section of the society. It must be kept in mind that every old is not outdated and every new is not perfect. Therefore, there is a need of co-coordinating the two in order to maintain the harmony between both. This function can be performed by philosophy of education. Providing educational planners, administrators, and educators with progressive vision to achieve educational development. Philosophy of education provides the educational planners, administrators, and educators with the right vision which guides them to attain the educational goals efficiently. It is very much useful to work of an educational practitioner and its place in the general scheme of life. Preparing the young generation to face the challenges of the modern time. The global impact of COVID-19 pandemic on educational system. Society is not static. It changes its value, tradition, custom, cultures, and many others from time to time. Philosophy of education is a guiding, steering, and liberating force that helps young people to and society at large to face the challenges of the modern time. It helps the individual to understand the relationship between his goal and the day-to-day routine, work, and develop critical attitudes towards life in diverse society. In conclusion, philosophy of education is important to educational management in the sense that philosophy and educations are complementary to each other in the sense that both deal with nature of human being. Philosophy determines the various aspects of education such as aims, curriculum, methods of teaching, role of teachers, and many others. It provides theoretical guidelines to the education, whereas education make it into practice. Thank you, and once again, good evening.